Namaste to all of you. I'm glad again to be with you tonight here. Let's go deeper into the meanings of Hatha Yoga Pradipika. It is a time of the year where I analyze this fundamental text. We are already in chapter 2. We are on, yes? So I am analyzing, I'm studying for you and explaining some of the esoteric meanings and some of the multiple meanings in a difficult text like this. Actually, Hatha Yoga Pradipika is written in a rather simple Sanskrit. When you read Abhinavagupta or other texts, they are way more complex, way more twisted. This one has a relatively simple Sanskrit language. It also has many references to health, to Ayurveda, to the three doshas, to diet, to the organs of the body. So it's a down-to-earth text, but of course it has also its mystical and metaphysical parts, because yoga, true yoga, never stays just with some elements of the physical body, is always interested in much more. And in the last session, I have already entered chapter 2, and I had listed the shloka, the verset number 3, which said, it will start speaking about pranayama, how to perform pranayama, and it starts speaking with general statements, and it describes the role of the prana. It told us that when the breath is agitated, the mind is agitated, and when the breath is calm, the mind is calm. Fundamental things. Everybody who does pranayama and yoga has to understand those things. And it tells us in the verse number 3, as long as there is breath in the body, and the word used is vayu, so very physical, breath like physical prana, life is there. Death is the departure of this breath from the body, therefore restrain the breath. I commented a little bit, making allusions to that scene from the movie Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or whatever the name was, Hidden Dragon, Crouching Tiger, whatever, in which the guy in the end, he knew that he had a limited number of breaths to live because he had been poisoned, and there was an antidote, and he had the knowledge to slow down his breath so that he could last a few hours by almost breathing not at all, and he chose not to for some personal reasons, but basically the idea is very clear. Philosophical discussions about what is death and life and all that, we have a lot in European culture and in many environments. The yogis don't make philosophy here. They tell you the engineering of it. You are alive when prana is with your body. When your body is abandoned by the prana for a reason or another, then death comes. Therefore, they incline, the last part is mysterious because it says, therefore, restrain the breath. Like if you control the prana, you will not die without wanting to die. That's what it implies secretly. Death is nothing but the prana going away. But if you control the prana doesn't go away when it wants and how it wants. It's yours. It depends on your will. And therefore, those who really control the prana can choose the time of their death within some reasonable limits. As you know, there are urban stories, urban legends in yoga, with like the one of Yogananda Paramahamsa, with Babaji, who has lived for more than 2,000 years, like yogis who can theoretically have a form of physical immortality because they can control their prana to a perfect level, and because of this, simply death is not coming, because they don't let the prana leave the body, and at the same time, the body does not decay beyond a certain limit. They don't get too old, too senile, too damaged, and so on. Again, many people are contesting because they say, show me one. Show me a single one of those so I can be convinced. You will never see that. You'll never be convinced. The universe is not trying to convince you in any way. Those of you who studied yoga, even the level 1 in Agama, you have been told about the law of silence, the wall of silence, that certain sensitive information doesn't circulate freely, and it's not for everybody to know or to understand everything. You think that you have the right to it, but the universe is not as democratic as that, exactly as you do not have access to the money of John D. Rockefeller as much as you think you are equal with John D. Rockefeller. Exactly in the same way, you don't have access to the informations of Milarepa, although you think that there's probably not big difference between you and Milarepa. Yoga says a different thing, that in knowledge such things are there. So mysteriously, Svatmarama keeps it simple. He says, I'm not going to make a lesson on philosophy. Death is when prana leaves the body. Therefore, you might consider that you want to learn controlling the prana really, really well, because even the issue of death then seems to be related with this point. And again, people will comment, will split there, will say, but what if you are walking quietly on the street and the car comes from behind that hits you and you die before you even realize that you die? You are pulverized into pieces. How are you going to control your prana and not die? No, nobody says you can do that. But then, therefore, it means that there are other factors in the process of life and death. Here we are talking about somebody sitting quietly in a hut for 100 years and doing yoga and achieving an extraordinary control over vital functions, over the prana, and being able, at least up till a certain point, to control some things. Don't take it like black and white. There are many shades of gray there, and therefore Svatmarama, in a very civilized and polite way, wants to tell you that why is pranayama important. But please remember, pranayama is not breathing techniques. It is achieved through some breathing techniques, but pranayama is not about breathing. Pranayama is a capacity which in the end, it would make you possible to stop your death from happening. That's not breathing techniques. There are people who think yoga has this pranayama, and pranayama is about hyperventilation or oxygenation of the tissues. Then you are at the level of materialism. In the medieval times, there were rumors, there was a very secretive tradition in the West, in Middle Asia and Central Asia, and the Middle East, and in China and India, which was the tradition of alchemy, that some people could play with the chemical elements and do mysterious things and rejuvenate and live long and all that stuff. It's a big tradition. There are books you can read about that. You can try to find out. Of course, most people don't believe in it. And the real big alchemists, when they heard that some people thought that that was one with the chemistry, that if you mix this blue substance with this white substance, you get a red substance instead. Wow, this is alchemy. No, it had nothing to do mixing some chemicals with each other. And that's why in France, the French alchemists, famous in the medieval times, they called the other people who did chemistry, they called them brûleurs de charbon, which means burners of coal, coal burners. No, there are people who, when they do alchemy, they just burn coal and they think that's alchemy. There are people who, when they do pranayama, they just hyperventilate and they think that's about it. It's about oxygen and oxygenation. Then you are a brûleur de charbon. You are burning coal. You didn't understand what the story is. The story is about prana. Number 4, first for today. When the nadis, the channels, that's very important, the meridians, are full of impurities, the wind, and here again the wind is used by the word maruta, and maruta are spirits of the wind. They always, when they want to speak about physical energy, they use vayu like wind or vata like in Ayurveda. But when they want to speak about the inner wind, which is prana, it's not a physical thing, they use allegoric words like Pavana, the god of wind, or Maruta, the spirits of the wind, the warriors of the wind, and others. So here it says when the nadis are filled with the impurities, the wind maruta, which means prana, therefore the energy, does not enter in the middle channel. That's the issue. Yeah, that's what he brings as argument, that the energy is supposed to go in your middle channel. Your middle channel is in the spine, along the spine. It's a special meridian, and in that meridian the energy usually does not circulate properly. It's locked. And when the energy goes in the middle channel, you start changing your state of consciousness. When the energy is rising, it's like you change filters of the mind. It's like you change channels in an old TV. Boom, 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 boom. You are a different person at every level of consciousness. So the middle channel is the big secret of Kundalini rising, and the middle channel is the big secret of having other states of consciousness. And therefore, for any yogi who works for the big things in yoga, the energy has sooner or later to start moving 10%, 5%, 50% through the middle channel. But the middle channel is usually plugged. It's exactly like a tunnel which is sealed at both ends and has not been used for 100 years. And you have to break in, you have to clean it, you have to make it available, and then you can run through this tunnel, through this channel. In the same way, the middle channel, which is along the spine, is the last to be open and the most important from a spiritual standpoint. So he says, as long as there are impurities, the wind can't even dream about going there. Then, how can one attain the goal of Unmani Bhava, or the perfection of one's practice? Bhava means state of mind, even emotional. And the word which he uses is Unmani. Mana is manas, the mind, and Unmani means supramental, above the mind. So he says, if you can't move your energy in the central channel, how can one reach the state beyond the mind? The mind is up till here, and the state of beyond the mind is here. How can you reach here if you don't have access to the channel which goes there? It's exactly like those buildings that have a penthouse on the top, and on that penthouse there is a separate elevator. And if you don't have the key or the code for that elevator, you cannot even go to the last floor of the building. No? The last floor of the building is Unmani Bhava, and you need a special channel, like an elevator, for that. And that channel is the central channel in your spine. That's the only one which changes the state of consciousness. So he's very straight. He simply says you have to eliminate the impurities so that the wind can go in the central channel, and then if you practice long enough, you will also be able to go to Unmani Bhava, which is a name which he gives. Supramental state of consciousness is called by Patanjali in the Yoga Sutra, the most classical text of yoga, is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi, a state of mind where the mind stops. Here he calls it Unmani Bhava, the state beyond the mind, where the mind is no more, where the mind shuts up. 5. Only when all the system of nadis, he calls it under a bizarre name, he says Sarva Nadi Chakra, like in Sarvangasana. Sarva means all, and then he says the nadis, he calls them Nadi Chakra, which means the nadis of all the chakras, or he metaphorically describes like you have 70,000 channels of energy, 14 meridians in the Chinese medicine, and all those channels are like a wheel for him. Let's consider them like it's a wheel. All that wheel of channels, they are not on a wheel except in the chakras. In each chakra, there are nadis placed like the spokes of a wheel. So it's a double entendre when he says all the system of nadis. It means all the petals of the chakras, or all the nadis, metaphorically being nicknamed like a wheel of nadis. When all the system of nadis, which was before ridden by impurities, he accepts when you come to yoga there are impurities, you are going to say from where? let's take the metaphysical explanation. From your 4,000 previous lives. Whatever shit you did or did not do in the 4,000 lives that you lived until now, it's there. It's in your nadis. No? Like, let's say you have a very bad way of handling anger. You are passive-aggressive, and you avoid being angry, and you avoid being angry, and you avoid being angry, and at some point you lose it, and then you go and kill somebody. That is a blockage in your nadis of Manipura chakra. It means somewhere, somehow, the energy in your Manipura chakra, in your navel chakra, is blocked, is disharmonious, it's uneven, and you don't have a way, like a resolution of conflict. You have a very bad conflict management, anger management, as there was the title of a Hollywood movie. So he says, only when all the system of nadis was ridden of impurities, and which was then gets cleansed, then the yogi becomes capable of regulating the prana. As long as there are discontinuity, your system of nadis, it's like an irrigation system with hundreds of channels. As long as all of them are working, the water is planned to flow harmoniously and evenly. You block 2, 3, 5 channels, suddenly the water cannot go by there, it moves in the other channels, it overwhelms them, then there is no balance, there is a disharmonious, chaotic rush of the water through one's irrigation system. The same is about the nadis. The nadis are calculated in such a way that you have a harmonious flow. You have to be in touch with nature, totally in harmony with nature. That, of course, in the New Age subculture, you express that in a romantic and svadistanistic way. The yogis express it in a technical way. To be in harmony with the nature, you need to have all your nadis in harmony. Of course, that is a very, very, very big statement, because you can say maybe Jesus had all the nadis in harmony. But I can give you examples of great spiritual teachers who were sometimes weird. Shivananda was ridden with diabetes and was eating a kilo of sugar every day. Ramakrishna was weak physically and he was smoking tobacco. Aurobindo and Gurdjieff are supposed that they were drinking booze more than a natural person would. That means getting drunk often. And like this, you can say, well, if those people were a bit disharmonious and they had their own neuroses, then who the fuck is normal around here? No, if those are like that. And that's why I'm telling you, take it with a pinch of salt. The ideals presented by Svatmarama are great. And remember, some of these yogis, they tried to live it out. They lived in an ashram since they were 16 years old, and they met with their guru, and they died at the age of 76 years old. So they lived in an ashram 60 years, not talking to people, not eating chemicals, not breathing chemtrails, not going to parties, eating just khichdi all day long, rice and lentils and all that, and doing pranayama 4 times per day, 2 hours each. 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at noon, 2 hours in the evening, 2 hours at midnight. Then some of these people really were very close to the great ideals. But today, people are trying to snatch yoga. I'm coming from Paris. I want to learn 3 months of yoga from Swami Vivekananda Sarasvati, and then I want to go back and snort some cocaine in Paris, doing some yoga from time to time, you know? Like, people try to steal. Svatmarama spent 60 years in an ashram, eating rice and dal. Then he was what he was writing about. He was it. No? This year, I did not drink probably a single gram of Coca-Cola. But last year, Swami Vivekananda, I did drink from time to time. So what if Coca-Cola is plugging some channels of energy? Then I better do some pranayama to unplug them again. Understand? Like, I'm not trying to preach to you anything like I am a perfect person. I live with you in the modern world. Sometimes I'm being tempted by one or the other thing. I generally try to be vegetarian, to have a clean diet, to do the things. Sometimes I fuck it up, but at least I know very clearly that I fuck it up. And I am admitting it freely in front of you. I'm not trying to pretend to be what I am not. And would I like to be like Svatmarama? If I would live in the Himalayas in an ashram and people would bring me food, even simple food, for the rest of my life, and I wouldn't have to go to the police to sort out my visas and so on, then I would like to live like Svatmarama. At least I would like to try. No? But the question is, we are not in the position of Svatmarama, and everything which he says, you have to tone it. Svatmarama says, when your system of nadis is perfectly clean, who was perfectly clean? Maybe Babaji, the guru of the guru of the guru of Yogananda. He lived in Himalayas and he was getting invisible when he didn't want people to find him or something. Then maybe there you talk about those kinds of things. Do they exist? I want to believe that they exist. And I actually do honestly believe that such things exist. But they are also very rare. Do there exist billionaires? Yes. How many did I meet? None. I don't think in my life I ever met one billionaire. No? So therefore, that's why I say there are things which exist and they can be extremely rare and hidden. And thus, take it always with a pinch of salt. When one has perfect nadi system, then things are flowing really easy, really harmoniously. 6. Therefore, pranayama, controlling the prana, which is the whole point which he is trying to make, must be practiced daily. He uses a word which in India means either daily or at least regularly. Obviously, Svatmarama in an ashram, he was doing pranayama every day. When I ask some of my students, are you doing pranayama every day? They say yes, except yesterday Oscar had to go back to France and we had a potluck and I did not. Like, okay, if you have potlucks more important than pranayama, then you don't do pranayama. That's what I say. For Svatmarama, there were no potlucks. There were not people leaving the island, or there he was always like a Chinese, like a clockwork German Swiss machine. Pranayama in the morning, pranayama at noon. People say, how boring. Maybe Svatmarama is in Shambhala now, looking with compassion upon you, and you think that the life of Svatmarama was boring, and therefore you have compassion for him, and he has compassion for you, and in 100 years you will know for sure whose compassion was more important. If you were right to be compassionate of Svatmarama, or if he was in the position to be compassionate of you. But he says pranayama must be practiced daily, regularly at least, in a sattvic state of mind. That's very important. You never practice pranayama angry, disturbed, chaotic, in anxiety, and people say, see, yes, Swamiji, see, that's why I don't practice pranayama, because sometimes I'm very disturbed emotionally. No. You are putting the cart in front of the horses. No, you should stop being chaotic and disturbed in the mind so that you can practice your pranayama. Yeah, but you know, I couldn't help. You couldn't help it? That's why you didn't write this book, and the guy called Svatmarama wrote it. No, that's precisely it. Learn from the masters. There were people who could do that, and we respect them, and we learn from them, because these are the pillars of the yoga tradition. These are the founding fathers. These are the real big ones. So pranayama, he says, he must be practiced daily in a sattvic state of mind. All of you who studied the 3 gunas here in Agama understand much more what is sattva, what is rajas, what is tamas, until the impurities of Sushumna Nadi are removed. The last one is Sushumna Nadi, the central Nadi. That's really important, because if that one is blocked, your consciousness is stuck in some levels, and then you say, I try, I didn't go higher. That's precisely the problem. And then he suddenly starts describing a pranayama. Later, realizing that he forgot to say some things, he will come back onto some things. But now in the shloka number 7, he says, okay, enough talking. Let me tell you what it is. He says, sitting in Baddha Padmasana, the yogin must draw in the prana through the lunar channel. First of all, we object to that one because in some Sanskrit version, this word Baddha is missing. For those of you who have an elephant memory, or for those of you who know yoga very well, Baddha Padmasana is a version of the lotus pose in which not only that you sit cross-legged, but you put your hands behind your back and you catch the toe of the big foot through the back here. It's a very difficult asana. One has to have a thin and very flexible body. And actually pranayama is not done in that one. That's why some yogis introduce this. It's a bit of the chaos of the yoga tradition, because most yogis would advise happily that you do, if you want to do a big pranayama, you should do it in Padmasana, in the lotus pose. I could expand on this enormously, because the yogis say you have to sit in a stable way. And for example, if your legs are just like this, what's happening in a Sukhasana, this is not Padmasana, no, then they will say, what's happening if, for example, you start having spasms in the body? Sometimes when you hold your breath for a long time, there appear some muscular contractions. Everybody who did free diving, you know that if you try to hold your breath more than 3 minutes, there are some technologies, and there are people who have reached to hold their breath 5 minutes, 6 minutes. Jacques Mayol, many years ago in the movie Le Grand Bleu, the Big Blue, he was able to go to 8 minutes, almost 9. Today there are people who have reached almost to 15. They can hold their breath for incredible length of time. And one of the tricks is that when you hold your breath, the air is released from the cells. You have secret reserves of oxygen in every cell of your body. And when the body finds that you have no more oxygen, if you learn the trick, if you do it first time, you die. But if you have learned this trick in 6 months, in 1 year, then suddenly your body starts doing some involuntary contractions and oxygen is released in the blood from your cells to save your life. And in this way, people can survive. So the yogis say, what if you do this and suddenly you have, like in Agnisara, then you fall down. Then you need to put your body in a stable position where the legs are locked, and whatever is happening, you will be like a pyramid. You will be like stable, like a block of stone. Some yogis even go as far as saying the thing, what if in the middle of your pranayama, you lift in the air? You start levitating, because pranayama produces this effect. Some yogis discovered levitation in pranayama. I had a student in Copenhagen when I was teaching. In the middle of a yoga class, she was a beginner in the 3rd level of yoga. After a year of yoga, she was very gifted, probably, or did it in a previous life. She had an access of levitation, and suddenly her body lifted like 60 centimeters in the air while she was like this, and then she fell back on the ground, boom, really hard, and then she fainted, no, because of it, And everybody could see, like people say, what, did Angelica just lift in the air? It's like, yes, she did. So therefore they say Padmasana and so on, you have to go into a very stable position. Tibetan yogis, sometimes they tie themselves with ribbons. They have some belts and they tie one from this knee to behind the shoulder here and one from this knee to behind the shoulder here, so that the body is really locked and you don't go into other. Also, when people go in Kundalini yoga, there are all sorts of things which are even stronger. So that's why here he says Baddha Padmasana, like a locked Padmasana, but he means actually Padmasana. So sitting in Padmasana, the yogin must draw in the prana through the lunar channel. He does not say draw the air. He uses the word prana. Like when you do pranayama, you don't draw air. You draw prana. It so happens that the air that we breathe is full of prana. And the easiest way to get prana in your body is via the nostrils through the air. But there is prana in the water, and you can learn how to suck it. There is prana in the food if the food is fresh and not microwaved. Microwaves kill the prana, and then you eat food without prana. There is prana in the sunshine, and therefore you stay in the sunshine in a logical way, in a rational way, you can load your. There is prana in the seawater, so if you bathe in the ocean, you can learn to accumulate prana, and then you have more vitality and you feel very much alive. So it's about prana. And he says the yogi must draw in the prana through the lunar channel. He uses Chandra, the word Chandra, the moon, not Vama, the left in Sanskrit, not the left nostril, the lunar channel. Here he speaks to those who want to hear. You are not talking about air and nostrils. You are talking about prana and channels. I read whole books written by famous authors, like Iyengar's book on pranayama. They don't have one page in 500 pages which speaks about prana. They claim to teach about pranayama, and they have one chapter where they describe the anatomy of the lungs, the alveolar structure of the lungs. I can bet to you that this guy didn't know anything about the alveoli in the lungs, but he could probably fly through the air. This is the difference between the yogis and the brûleurs de charbon. The brûleurs de charbon think that yoga is gymnastics and oxygenation. This guy talks clearly. He says you draw the prana through the lunar channel, which also means that you inhale through the left nostril. But the meaning is deeper, and he talks to those who catch that meaning. After holding it according to his capacity, he exhales via the solar nadi. Via the solar nadi. Solar nadi means the right nostril, but it's a nadi which is in the nostril here. It's a ending, it's a meridian which collects the prana. So he basically says you inhale through the left, you exhale through the right. And he is measured here, he says, holding it according to his capacity. Like he knows, in the beginning, you can hold your breath maybe 30 seconds. It's okay. 30 seconds is very, very good for a beginner. Some beginners can do only 15. That's also good for a start. You hold whatever you can. According to if you do it too much, you can get lung diseases, you can get heart diseases, you can get other major problems, as he will tell you in a second. Then he draws prana. Again, he uses the word prana in the text. I did not substitute words. I'm trying to give you a translation as accurate as possible using the words. Then he draws prana through the solar channel. He says Surya, the sun, performs kumbhaka or retention in the prescribed matter, which means to the utmost but not forcibly. Like you don't hold it less than you could, because then you waste time and resources. I could hold my breath easily for 30 seconds, but I'm a bit impatient and the capacity increases. So again, shloka number 8, then he draws prana through the solar channel, performs retention in the prescribed manner, which means much but not too much, and exhales through the moon. He uses again the word moon, not left side. 9. Therefore, he wants to make it clear because it's a peculiar pattern. Left, right, right, left, left, right, right, left. Therefore, and he wants to make it clear, he will repeat like for stupid people 2 times or 3 times. He wants to make sure you got the point. Therefore, inhaling every time through the same nostril through which one had previously exhaled. So if you have exhaled through the left, then you inhale through the right, you inhale also through the same right next time. So inhaling every time through the same nostril through which one had previously exhaled, one must retain the air forcefully. He uses the word forcefully. People who learn pranayama here in Agama, we show them that when you inhale, then you are putting a certain power in the pranayama, It's not done in a wimpy, dreamy way. It's done in a proactive, solar way. So then you retain the air forcefully, but not pushing yourself into madness, and then exhale through the other nostril slowly, not rapidly. He advocates slow exhale. In many rhythms used in the pranayamas, including in this Nadi Shodhana, Sukha Purvak, as it is called when you start counting the timing of it, it is used the thing that you inhale, for example, for 4 seconds, and you exhale for 8 seconds. Like exhaling is a bit slower, double slower than inhaling. Inhaling is strong and exhaling goes slowly. That there are reasons for that, but he doesn't bother to explain here. 10. Again, he repeats the stupid explanation for people who have difficulties in understanding. Again, when the prana is drawn by the Ida Nadi is the name of the left Nadi, it must be expelled by the other one, and filling it up through Pingala Nadi and holding it in, one must exhale it through the left. The practitioner who regularly, which means daily preferably, performs this exercise of the sun and the moon, purifies his nadis within 3 months or more. This is the first particular pranayama which you study in Agama. In Agama, we teach first people in level 2 the principles of pranayama and the component elements of pranayama, and in level 3 we teach them the complete yogic breath, the pattern of breathing, the basics of it. Then in level 4, if I'm not wrong, people are already going into the Nadi Shodhana pranayama, which is exactly what he has described here. This is the first pranayama: left, right, right, left, left, right, right, left, like a pendulum, going to the left, to the right. What is between them? The middle. The point is that you find the midpoint, but you have to go to the left and to the right a lot until you purify, and then you can have the components. So he says, if you do it every day, and if there are no special, like I'm smoking cigarettes, okay, then you are not going to achieve purity in 3 months, because every day you put shit back into your system, and it's your choice to do that. Therefore, take it again with a pinch of salt. He says, in perfect diet, living in an ashram in the Himalayas like me, Svatmarama, and not smoking and not taking drugs and not doing this and not doing that, and not eating monosodium glutamate when you eat your chips, then in 3 months, doing this every day, you can get the results. Again, it's ideal conditions. 11. Gradually increase the number of kumbhakas to 80. Practicing this 4 times a day. Morning, he uses the word sunrise. Noon or midday. Evening, he uses the word for sunset. And midnight. Basically, if you want ever a big tapas in pranayama, it's like this: 80 pranayamas, 4 times per day. That makes it 320 pranayamas per day. Honestly, I don't know if there is a person in this room who did 320 pranayamas in 1 day. No, not to mention that this may be double pranayamas. People who do a lot of pranayama, they can sometimes hold their breath for 2 minutes. So each pranayama will take almost 3 minutes. Multiply 320, that means 1,000 minutes of actual sitting on the mat and doing pranayama. I hope you understand. 600 minutes is 10 hours. 1,000 minutes of pranayama means 16 hours of pranayama, which means you do nothing else. You eat, you sleep, and you do pranayama. You are going to say, they had time. I have to earn my daily bread. There were people who ran in Egypt, in the desert, the fathers of the desert. Then they didn't have to put bread on their table. They didn't have a job. They didn't have a boss. They didn't have a family to cater. They just stayed in the desert and they said, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. 16 hours per day. So it's not that it's impossible. It's impossible for modern people's mind because people are distracted and they say, yeah, but I want to travel, I want to go to London, I want to meet with my... Okay, then it's not Svatmarama. Then don't be amazed that you don't fly through the air when you do pranayama, because you are not doing it the way of Svatmarama. Svatmarama is a fanatic. Svatmarama is a guy whose life is yoga from morning till evening 24/7. When you do that, you have another level of practice, you have another level of accomplishment. So take it with a pinch of salt. It doesn't mean you can't do yoga. It doesn't mean you can't have big effects. But they will not happen in 3 months. Maybe they will happen in 6 years. It's still good. It's still something. Therefore, it's proportional to one's involvement and efforts. And he gives one of the wonderful references in the yoga literature by saying this in shloka number 12. In the first stage, there is heat and the body perspires. That's the first sign you do pranayama well. You get hot and your body sweats. You're going to say, well, I sweat anyway in Thailand because it seems to be closer to the sun than the rest of the planet Earth or something. That's true. But even if you go to Russia, you are supposed to sweat when you do it. Even if it's winter in Russia, you are still supposed to sweat. Yeah? Pranayama produces a fire inside. The energy starts combusting something in your system. In the first stage, that's how you know you are in the first stage. You perspire. In the middle stage, the body quivers or trembles. So you are like somebody has put electricity on you, and your body goes like, and then your body goes like. There is a trembling. Maybe outside people cannot see it, but inside you can feel like you are electrocuted, like somebody is electroshocking you in a mild and pleasant way. It's not unpleasant. It's a pleasant sensation of electricity through the body, in which the body seems to sometimes quiver. All the people who go to the study of Kundalini Yoga, they know how to discover that level of pranayama. And in the final stage, one rises the energy steadily to the highest place. That means the energy is rising through Sushumna Nadi and it goes to the crown chakra. So in the final stage, whatever you do, there is a feeling of the energy moving through the spine towards Sahasrara. Therefore, the breath must be restrained. He again is telling you, I can give you a lot of arguments why you should do pranayama. If you want spiritual accomplishment, you should do pranayama every day. This is how he thinks. 13, very down to earth. I consider this Svatmarama sometimes very down to earth. He gives a simple advice. You wouldn't have thought about it. He says, one must rub back into the body the sweat resulting from the exertion of pranayama. In this way, it becomes strong and light. That means when you do pranayama and you sweat, you don't go and take a shower. Because one, the water will put you in touch with your svadhisthana and the energy will not go up, will get stuck in the second chakra by resonance. And two, that sweat which you sweat during pranayama is loaded with minerals and salts, and they have to be reabsorbed back into your body. And therefore, after you sweat, when you take a break, you rub it back into the body like a gentle massage. You let it dry, and then he says it's even better. In this way, your body becomes strong and light. It's like an alchemical process. It's like a mysterious chemistry that you do pranayama, and then you get a potency from this sweating in the pranayama. 14. In the beginning of this practice, food abundant in milk and ghee is recommended. Although you are going to see, when he talks about Kriya Yoga, Svatmarama says clearly that obesity, corpulence, is a problem. And the nadis are not in such a good condition when you are too fat. But nevertheless, with yogis doing this kind of effort, then you also need very nourishing food. This is one of the places where we in the yoga tradition are completely against some of the abomination in the nutrition of the West. They were encouraged by what I talked earlier in the lecture for the first level, even macrobiotics and George Oshava. George Oshava, the Japanese guy who created macrobiotics, he was not used to cows because in Japan nobody has cows. Cows are frequent in India. In Japan, probably the emperor of Japan got a cow for a ritual purpose. For there are some cows in a temple in Bangkok where you can go and feed the cows. These are ritual things from the tradition. But the cows are not usual. Even in Thailand, how much are people used to the cows, to the milk, to the dairy products? And then because of this, and because of the obsession of the American Hollywood stars of eat your carbs and don't get fat, people started coming up with a theory that for a reason or another, the milk is harmful. Svatmarama swears by milk and ghee. He is ready to eat kilos every day. He doesn't have any problem with it. Of course, he says don't get obese because of it. But actually, for a person who is active, it is healthy. The yoga tradition never had anything against milk. Yes, we can have something against milk which is pasteurized. You know, with ultrasounds, there is a form of sterilization with ultrasounds, which is compulsory in most countries, and which is called pasteurization. The milk which is pasteurized loses very important components, especially energetic and subtle. Yes, we are against the milk which is with growth hormone, because the cows are injected with growth hormone to grow quickly and so on, and then the milk is polluted with antibiotics, with chemicals. It has to be the milk of a cow which goes free and is given zero medication. A cow which, like 100 years ago, is going free on the pasture, and half of its milk is given to its baby, and half of its milk is taken in a bucket and consumed by the human beings. Such a cow's milk is perfectly okay according to yoga, and these modern nutritional theories, they are bullshit. I remember when I was living in Rishikesh, one of my friends who was a Swami there, he said, what is this nonsense with the milk? Because in India we are okay with it. And I said, some people say that they are lactose intolerant, and as you get older, you cannot digest milk, and that babies can somehow digest milk, but then when you get a teenager or something, your thymus gland is closing down, and then you cannot digest milk, and you become allergic to milk. The guy was 65 or 67, and he looked at me and he said, it means I'm a baby because I drink a liter every day, and I don't have any problem with it. No? This is the story about allergies, thymus gland, and other such things. So he simply says, in the beginning of pranayama, because your body is shaking, trembling, burning, sweating, food abundant in milk and ghee is recommended. When the practice becomes established and regular, this requirement is no longer necessary. So he says, in the beginning, your body has to find its balance, and it will burn a lot of this fat from the milk and ghee and so on, and you have to give it to it, because otherwise the body will take from the wrong place, from its own reserves, and you might get sick, you might get burned out. Therefore, he says, in the beginning, you should take rich food. Feel that you nourish yourself well. Then, he says, when you become a master in pranayama, then you absorb prana directly from the air, and a lot of things are not necessary from you. People who do big-time pranayama, they sleep less, they eat less, they drink less, because their body is nourished directly by the prana from the universe. And therefore, milk and ghee are necessary only in the first months of pranayama, when you are in a transitional period. He is very, very precise about such details. 15. Just as lions, elephants, and tigers are tamed only by and by, so the breath, he uses the word vayu, the breath itself, must be controlled by degrees, or else it may harm, and he uses a word which in Sanskrit means equally death. So it means it may harm or kill even the practitioner. You can do pranayama stupidly, without a teacher, without guidance, and then you find yourself dead. And then you say, yoga killed me. It can. Electricity can also kill you, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't use electricity in your daily life. It means you have to be respectful of electricity, because it's a big force of nature. Prana in your body is the biggest player in your system, and you don't play with prana chaotically. Exactly as you try to tame an elephant or a tiger, and you do it by and by, a little bit today, a little bit tomorrow, and the tiger or the elephant gets to know you, starts understanding your commands, you establish a reward system with the animal, and slowly you can tame it. There are people who perform circus numbers with tigers, with lions, and with elephants, so it's possible, but you don't do it suddenly. An elephant or a tiger does not become educated or tamed in 3 days. In the same way, nobody becomes a pranayama yogi in 3 days. It's by and by, gradually. The energy must be controlled by degrees, or else it may harm. He tells you clearly. If you want to do crazy experiments with pranayama, it may harm you or kill you. By the prop, 16 gives the general thing. Like now, if he said that, he splashes it all the way. 16. By proper practice of pranayama, all diseases can be destroyed. But through the improper or incorrect practice of yoga, he doesn't mean only pranayama, but yoga in general, all diseases can arise. It's a double-edged knife. You can harm yourself with yoga, you can heal yourself with yoga. It has to be done right. If you don't do it the proper way, better don't do it, because you are playing with dynamite and it can explode in your face. Yeah? Yoga has to be respected as technology, because it plays with very strong things, but precisely because of that, it is like dynamite, useful and dangerous at the same time. And he gives more signals of this, like showing you that he knows exactly what he's talking about. And actually, in the end of this book, in chapter 5, he wrote an additional chapter, wonderful, where he talks about the fact how you produce disease through yoga and how to heal it when it's possible and if it's possible anymore. He says in shloka number 17, hiccups, asthma, cough, headache, pain in the ears and eyes, and various other diseases arise from the disturbances of the vital air, called here again pavana, prana. Pavana is the god of air, of the air element, and it means not something physical, it's something invisible which is in the air, by which he means prana. So remember again, there are people who cannot control their hiccups. I remember once I knew a guy, he was very vata, and every 3 times per day, in 8 hours of work, I met him at his work, he was getting like 1 hour of hiccups. He was just like, and he couldn't stop it in any way. No? And I knew his middle channel is blocked, his vata is not circulating properly, but he didn't know anything about yoga, and he didn't want to know anything about yoga. and therefore hiccups, asthma, cough, like chronic coughing, headache, pain in the ears and eyes, and various other diseases arise from the disturbances of the vital air or pavana. It's not a joke. You don't want to do pranayama the wrong way. You better learn it from a teacher, because teachers have tried it for years and they know exactly what works and what doesn't work. And then he gives another of the great rules. He says, one should inhale with great care, like gradually, exhale with great care, hold it with great care. It's like you handle nitroglycerin. Yeah, you handle it carefully. You inhale properly, you hold it properly, you exhale properly. This is how perfection is obtained. You see sometimes people doing advanced forms of pranayama or mudras from Kundalini who go and they go like, they do some cycles like this and so on. Those people have done pranayama for years before they were ready to do that, because it's something to which you come gradually. If you start directly with that, there is at least 50% chance you will damage yourself. And that's why, please don't copy pranayama from books, from videos, from people, except from authorized teachers who know what they teach, they know how to teach, and they will teach it in a safe way so you don't harm yourself. Pranayama and yoga in general can be damaging, and Svatmarama says it very clearly. There is no hidden agenda about it. 19. When the nadis are purified, then again he gives you some symptoms. He realized that he started talking about left, right, and he didn't tell you some fundamental things. And here he says, when the nadis are purified, there appear external signs, because people say, how do I know? Oh, my teacher told me your channels are pure, now you can do this. That's one way. But are there any ways of me looking in the mirror and seeing it? He says there appear external signs, such as a slim and radiant body. He talks about ghee and butter, ghee and milk. But he says when your nadis are clean, you have a slim and radiant body, radiant. They use that in Ayurveda to show that your skin is shining. It's like you have put oil on your skin. That's ojas. You have ojas in the body. You are shining. That means by radiant, which shows success without doubt. The breath can be retained with ease. That now I'm in number 20. So it's signs of success. First he says that the body is slim and radiant. Then he says the breath can be retained with ease for long. So you can hold your breath 1 minute, no problem, because your nadis are clean and the energy is circulating well. The inner fire is increased. The inner fire, remember we talked about it in the chapter about asanas. Most of the asanas which he described, he says this asana is increasing your inner fire. It's the digestive fire, the inner fire. They consider that if you lose this inner fire, you start rotting, you start decaying. And therefore, for them, the digestive fire, that you should have a strong digestion, is very important. It's like the motor of the being, of the body. So the inner fire is increased. When the nadis are purified, the inner sound, nada, is perceived, and one is free from disease. Here is the shocking one. Every human being can hear internal sounds, sounds which don't have a physical effect. Modern people call these inner sounds tinnitus, and they consider it a terrible disease. It's not. We use it in the Laya Yoga meditation all the time. You have to become able to hear the inner sound, because without the inner sound, you cannot go deep into some aspects of yoga. And some people say, but shouldn't we be afraid of it? No, not at all. The yogis consider it a great gift. It's something which happens when you are good in yoga. When your nadis are pure and your body is radiant and everything, then also the inner sound is perceived and one is free from disease. The inner sound usually sounds like a whistle, and it's sometimes in the left ear, sometimes in the right ear, sometimes in both, sometimes nowhere, sometimes everywhere. And modern science does not understand why some people hear it and what to do with it. When I lived in Copenhagen, because the Danish medical system is very advanced and very well performing, one of the top medical systems, and because it's a free medical system, I went to one of the doctors there and asked them about it, to the ear, nose, throat clinic, the people who dealt with this. And I asked the top expert from that hospital what they knew about it. And they said that, of course, medically, if you have to find a medical cause, there can be two causes. Either your internal ear, the hammer and the anvil, all those, they give a false signal, which means your internal ear is damaged. I said, who gets that? He said, people who work with pick hammers and they don't wear protection, people who work in airports and the turbo engines make too much noise and they don't wear protection helmets, or other such things. People who, DJs who live between huge loudspeakers and boom, 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 they pump it up and they don't wear protection. Such people can eventually damage, because it's a machinery in there, and that's a delicate machinery, and if you subject it to too much hassle, then you can damage it. That's one cause. The second possible cause is that you get a tumor in your brain. Somewhere where your auditory centers are, you have a tumor, and that tumor presses on your nerves, and it gives you the false impression that there is a sound when actually there is no sound. So it's either coming from the brain or it's coming from the internal ear. And I said, okay, and according to your statistics, because people come and complain to you that they hear this, how many people are actually having this? Internal ear damage or brain damage? He was very honest. He didn't try to bullshit me in any way. But the answer, I almost dropped dead when I heard the answer. The answer was 1%. 1% of the people who come to the audio doctor, they actually are discovered with a problem in or there. The other 99%, 99, the doctor tells them there is no reason for you to hear a sound, because nothing is damaged in the internal ear, nothing is damaged in the brain. And the patient says, but doctor, I still can hear the damn sound and it's driving me nuts. This inner sound can be heard in 16 ways. In the 4th chapter, Svatmarama will describe all the tonalities of it. You are going to hear about it, that sometimes it sounds like a waterfall and sometimes it sounds like a whistle. Two different people can hear it in a different way, but it's the same sound. Nevertheless, it is called nada, and this nada is a sign of success. People who are successful, they can hear it. And people who have still too many impurities, they can sometimes hear it, sometimes not. In the school here, we work with this nada, and there are people who hear it, and there are people who have difficulties with it. It depends also whether you are an auditory person or a visual person or a kinesthetic person. So it's not as simple as that. But remember, he gives the following signs of success: a slim and radiant body, the breath retained with ease for a long time, the inner fire increased, the inner sound perceived, heard clearly, and one is free from disease. There are other texts which give parallel lists, which are 80% identical with this one. I have seen in other yoga texts some other yogis giving alternative versions of this. And then he realizes that he didn't say a very big thing. He started talking about pranayama, how important prana is, all that, life and death, therefore control prana. He taught Nadishodhana pranayama directly. Then he said, wait a little bit. There are many things to say. You have to eat ghee and milk. You have to do it gradually. Be careful that you don't get the hiccups and the headache and this and that and all that. These are the signs of success. Like, he's a bit chaotic. He remembers some things. And now the things which he last remembers before coming back to it is that this story of impurities. He feels that he did not press enough on this thing, that there are impurities and you can eliminate them. And in the shloka number 21, he says the following: if there be excess of fat and phlegm in the body, the 6 kriyas called shatkarma, the 6 acts, should be performed first. Others that have their 3 doshas in balance don't have to. Many observations in this shloka. First of all, when he wants to describe a body which is impure, he describes it as being fat and with a lot of phlegm. That's not entirely honest, especially since he is preaching diets rich in milk and butter and ghee. But of course, he says you do that, but you do a ton of yoga, so you stay athletic. If there is excessive fat and phlegm in the body, phlegm is the English name given for kapha dosha, one of the 3 doshas of Ayurveda, the phlegm. Please be, he talks strictly metaphorically in the meaning that there can be excessive bile, and the most painful of them is actually excessive wind, excessive vata. They are very dangerous and very unpleasant, and they can produce many. He doesn't mention them all. From time to time he reminds, and he says, actually I'm talking about all the 3 doshas. Those of you who are in level 1, you know that we have a lecture when we talk about Vamana Dauti, where we tell you a few things about the Ayurvedic medicine and the theory of the 3 doshas, which is fundamental to understand yoga literature, because many of these yogis, they knew Ayurvedic tricks and they knew the theory of Ayurveda, and they could very easily spot if your system is imbalanced in terms of kapha, pitta, or vata. For those of you who never heard about this, kapha, pitta, vata are the 3 names of the 3 doshas, and Ayurvedic medicine says that the health of your body depends if these 3 doshas are in balance at all times and in all the parts of your body. And when they are, you are healthy and radiant. When you have too much of one of them or too little of one of the other in your lungs or in your belly or in your head or in your right knee or in your left knee, then some diseases will appear there because of that. So he says, if there be excessive fat and phlegm in the body, it's very easy to see that fat people, phlegmatic, who accumulate kapha, they accumulate a lot of toxins in the body. It is known even medically that your fat, if you have fat, it's full of toxins, because fat is a way of the body to deposit toxins. When you eat things which are too acid or too something, the body combines them with something and puts them into a fat cell so that they don't kill you. But they are there exactly like we deposit radioactive material in a cave, or exactly as we have landfills where we put garbage. That garbage will stay there for 1,000 years. And it's a ticking bomb. In the same way, fat and kapha, but also the others, they are a ticking bomb in the body because they contain a lot of poisons. But it's not only kapha. Kapha is the one which is easy to see, because I look at Oscar, and Oscar is fat and phlegmatic. And then I say, see, this guy has accumulated lots of ama, has accumulated lots of impurity. What about one who is very pitta? What about one who has too much vata? Ayurvedic doctors and people like Svatmarama, they know how to identify this, but he doesn't want to make a theory of Ayurveda in a text like this. Therefore, that you read some Ayurvedic texts, and therefore he is just giving one of them as example, but he involves all three of them, because if you have excessive pitta or excessive vata, it's equally problematic, sometimes maybe even more problematic. So he says, if there be excess of fat and phlegm in the body, and of pitta and of vata, the 6 kriyas should be performed first. Like first, balance your doshas. He means before doing pranayama. I forgot to tell you, if you are very imbalanced, take it easy and first do the kriyas to purify the karmas. Others that have their 3 doshas in balance, they don't have to. It's very clear. If somebody is in perfect health, radiant health, they can go acceleratedly. But usually a guru looks at the person and says, no, I'm not confident that you can do Kundalini Yoga. Do some more practice because I don't want to see you die on the mat. No, this is how it goes. There are precautions to be taken. And therefore, in about 20 shlokas, he will explain, I will not finish it tonight, I will get it started. He starts explaining the system of kriyas, the Shat Karma Kriya. 10 years ago, I made a commentary on Geranda Samhita. The Yogi Geranda, who wrote that text in the 18th century sometime, or maybe in the late 17th century, somewhere in that time, he does a much better job than Svatmarama. That guy is like an engineer. He says, there are 6 karmas, and the first is called Dauti. Dauti is of 4 types. The first type of Dauti is also subdivided in 4 other Dautis. And he describes, therefore, approximately 30 techniques of Kriya, subdivisions. This guy is in the fast speed, he is in a high lane, and he goes quickly over them. Therefore, you cannot really learn the Kriyas from Hatha Yoga Pradipika and Svatmarama, but at least it's a reminder. You want to hear more about that externally, I think my satsangs about Geranda Samhita must be somewhere online, and you can listen to them and see what Geranda says there. And if you want more, you come to Agama and you learn them. We teach them. We do these Kriyas, not only the 6 ones which he describes, all the 30 or 25 ones which Geranda describes, we describe them. Some of them we don't do in the class because we find them a bit extreme and useless, but otherwise we do describe them. Students in Agama are informed about all the 30 different Kriyas which are practiced and the exact system to which category they belong. Here, Svatmarama, in my opinion, he goes a little bit on the surface. He's not trying to teach you the Kriya. This is a memorator. It's a memento. He's simply trying to describe the yoga tradition, and of course he doesn't expect you to learn Nauli from his papers. He expects you to learn Nauli from your yoga teacher, not from a paper. And that's why he doesn't pay too much attention to details. He says in the shloka number 22, Dauti, Basti, Neti, Trataka, Nauli, and Kapalabhati, these are known as the 6 acts of purification, which is called Shat Karma in Sanskrit, or Shat Karma Kriya. Shat means 6, Karma, actions, acts, and Kriya is the purification. So the 6 acts of purification. 23. Again, I don't intend to teach them to you. We just go over it because it's the beauty of a traditional text which is reminding to us all about the yoga tradition and what should be done and when and how. 23. These 6 actions that purify the body should be kept quite secret. They yield wonderful results. He uses an expression which is translated by 2 other Sanskritologists as amazing qualities. For example, they describe one and says this one gives clairvoyance. It opens your third eye so that you have clairvoyance. So amazing gifts, wonderful results means also amazing qualities. So the Shat Karma Kriyas, they go really far and are held in high esteem by great yogis. One of the greatest yogis of the second half of the 20th century in popular culture in India was Dhirendra Brahmachari. Dhirendra Brahmachari was the first yogi who had a broadcast on ZTV or something on Indian television. He was the first man he himself and his disciples taught yoga on television, on Indian television, and you realize that India is full of yogis. They have thousands and thousands where to choose from, and they chose Dhirendra Brahmachari. Dhirendra Brahmachari was the personal yoga instructor of Miss Indira Gandhi, ex-First Minister of India, and also of her son Sanjay Gandhi, who was also Prime Minister of India. So he was a VIP guru in India because they knew that he was the right thing. He had a guru which had been a legendary yogi, Maharshi Kartikeya, who was said to have lived 300 years of age. He was one of those yogis about which a lot of legends were being said. And he was teaching mostly the 6 Kriyas. He said, my students, like Miss Indira Gandhi, they don't have time to do 6 hours of asanas per day. They want something quick, which works very quickly. They want some things which give immediate results and by which they can purify their body and live their life with great energy and healthy. And that are the 6 Kriyas. You don't need more than the 6 Kriyas for that. You do the 6 Kriyas and you get that. That's why I met this much in yoga. I asked one of my mates from my young days, after 40 years, I asked him, what did you use most from all the yoga which you learned when you were young? And he told me Vamana Dhauti. Like the one technique which saved my ass and saved my days was always Vamana Dhauti. Whatever else I did, whenever I got in trouble, in real trouble, either I got a flu or I got a food poisoning or I got something, I did Vamana Dhauti and I was straight as rain. Those of you who did Agama, you know what Vamana Dhauti is. It is described here as well. And for those of you who don't know, it's the vomiting Kriya. It's a Kriya where you vomit. No? And for many people, it's like, oh no, you know. I'm telling you, I know yogis who after 40 years, they said, Vamana Dhauti has saved my life. No? So therefore, you might, if you become a yogi or a yogini, you might reconsider that one because it's truly something. So he simply says the 6 actions, the Shat Kriya, they should be kept quite secret. It's paradoxical, but it comes again. No, the yogis simply say, you will see that some things are not for everybody. Not for everybody. Dhirendra Brahmachari, who was a great yogi, he wrote a small book on the Kriyas, which probably if you find it on Amazon or something as second-hand books, it will cost you $150 at least, and it's a brochure. It's a small book. It's extremely rare, that's why, and it's very bold. Then he wrote a book on asanas, which is called Yogasana Vijnana. If you look for it on Abe Books or some other specialized site, it costs probably 400 euros. It's a super rare book, Yogasana Vijnana, probably the best asana book written by a regular yogi in India. Yeah? And maybe you will find it scanned by some smart person. Nowadays, everything gets scanned. And I found Yogasana Vijnana, not scanned, the other one, the Kriya book, Yogic Sukshma Vyayama, it was called, scanned by some Russian people. And it's online there. And then Dhirendra Brahmachari was preparing the cake, the cherry on top of the cake, which is a book on pranayama, mudras, and bandhas, which is where he goes to Kundalini. That book never appeared. He died before he published it. One of his nephews took it, locked it in a drawer, and I sent Muktananda to talk to him in New Delhi. I was in India at that time, and I gave him the address, and I said, go to this address. There is a guy there. He has the book of Dhirendra Brahmachari in manuscript. It's typed on a typewriter, and the photos are stuck on the paper with glue. So it was a draft of the book, and then it had to be collected and printed, and so on. And I said, I have been a disciple of Dhirendra Brahmachari. I met him personally. I learned some yoga from him. Won't he give me the book so I can publish it for his uncle in the name of his deceased yogi? The guy asked me for 200,000 rupees for it, which is not so much, but I didn't have that money at that time. Therefore, I didn't pick it up. I don't know if the guy is still alive, if the book is still for sale. Some intelligent person would go and dig the book of Dhirendra Brahmachari from that fellow and publish it, because it's a diamond. The books of Dhirendra Brahmachari are some of the best books in Kriyas and Easy Yoga. It's the best book in Hatha Yoga Asanas. Like, we don't even come close to BKS Iyengar, and that BKS Iyengar is a kindergarten boy compared to Dhirendra Brahmachari. And finally, the book of Pranayama Mudras and Bandhas, which is lost for the time being. I wonder if some ants did not eat it in the last 20 years in that drawer, and it's lost forever. This being said, that's why the 6 actions, even Svatmarama says, that purify the body, should be kept quite secret. The 6 kriyas, not many people practice them, and not many people practice them correctly, and many yogis find them easy, quick, outstanding, amazing, really good. They yield wonderful results or amazing qualities, like even paranormal phenomena, and are held in high esteem by great yogis. Many great yogis spoke well about this. And then he starts directly with the first of them. Just to show you how it is, because it's late enough and I could stop, I want to read for you 24 and 25, so shlokas, because they refer to Dauti. But remember, there are 4 Antar Dauti, 4 other Dautis, 4 other Dautis, and 3 or 5 in the other category. All in all, there are about 16 techniques of Dauti. What he describes here is just one of them. Gyaranda speaks about all the 16 or 17 forms of Dauti, describing them. So here Svatmarama is not very strong, but I have no doubt that he knew. He knew the Dautis and all the Nauli and all this, but he doesn't want to speak too much. He just wants to keep it brief. He just says, look, by the way of pranayama, before pranayama you have to burn your fat and to burn your kapha and pitta and vata, and therefore for that you do the Shatkarma Kriya. And then he gives an example. It's a pretty extreme example. In the school we teach this one here in Agama, but we never do it in the class. If anybody wants to try it at home, they are free to try, simply because this technique can be supplemented by others very well and having the same effects or even bigger effects, and therefore this technique is more spectacular than actually useful. Why did Svatmarama choose this one out of all the 16 Dautis? It's a mystery. It's his choice. 24. One must swallow a clean strip of cloth about 4 fingers wide and 15 cubits long, 15 feet long, in the manner shown by the Guru. So he is not telling you everything, because this piece of cloth must be wet. You cannot swallow a piece of cloth which is not wet, because otherwise you don't have enough saliva to make it slide. So it has to be wet. And he doesn't say other things, that you swallow a little and you take it out, and the next day you swallow 30 centimeters more, and then you take it out, so that you make sure that your stomach gets used to it and it doesn't get entangled in your stomach and make a ball or a knot, because then you cannot pull it out again and you have to go to a surgeon. And in India there were no surgeons at that time, so you just die, basically. So he says you swallow a clean strip of cloth 4 fingers wide and 15 cubits long, like gauze. People are using gauze, medical gauze, this thing which you use to bandage yourself around. It's good enough. Or Muslim, simple linen cloth, not very thick, very thin. The tissue must be wet with tepid water, and then one must draw it out. This is known as Dauti karma. It's actually the complete name in the Geranda system is Vastra Dauti, Vastra meaning cloth. So it's the cloth, Dauti, the Dauti. What's the purpose of this? Because you put it in the stomach, and there if it stays 5 minutes in the stomach, it rubs against the walls of the stomach, and it takes all the mucus from the walls of the stomach. Your stomach is very dirty, and there is old mucus for days and months, which is stagnant somewhere there, and therefore this cloth as a foreign body will interact with the walls of the stomach, which move all the time, and then when you take it out, it would be slimy. It would be filled up with that mucus. That's the secret of it. And 25 gives the effects. It says, without a doubt, like he goes strong. He uses a strong formula. He says, no doubt. No, like, don't have any doubt about this. It cures coughing, asthma, diseases of the spleen, and diseases of the skin. Like he uses the word for leprosy. Leprosy was one of the boogeymen of Indian history. If you are a leper, you are as good as dead. This guy says if you swallow a piece of cloth, it may cure your leprosy. Anyone would be a leper in the 16th century India, and you heard about this, you might consider trying it, because otherwise your life would be caca. Your life would be shit. Everybody will throw you to the garbage and nobody would even look in your direction. Therefore, these were serious issues for those people. When somebody says you can cure asthma, you can disease the diseases of the spleen, like spleen enlargement, skin diseases, among which leprosy is quoted outstandingly, and the 20 kinds of illnesses brought on by excess of kapha or phlegm. I honestly don't know enough Ayurveda to remember if there are 20 or if it used metaphorically or humoristically. He basically says all the, besides skin disease, spleen enlargement, asthma, coughing, it also cures all the kinds of the illnesses brought by the excess of kapha. Kapha is one of the 3 doshas, and therefore each one of the 3 doshas of Ayurveda, when there is too much of it or too little of it, it produces some serious diseases. And kapha, being one of them, produces, let's say approximately, it's not entirely true, it produces 1/3 of the diseases. There are 20 kinds of diseases, or maybe there are 25 or 15. It doesn't matter. It's a metaphor. Take it metaphorically. It basically says that this Vastra Dauti cures all the diseases produced by the excess of kapha. If at any point of your life you discover that you have a morbid excess of kapha, then you want to do some techniques which clean the kapha. Lucky you, it's not only this one with a cloth. This one is a very spectacular one, because if you see a person swallowing 5 meters of muslin and keeping it in the stomach and maybe doing some nauli and then pulling it out, of course you have to leave a margin out because you'll never find it again. No? The end stays out, and then after 5 minutes or so on, you slowly pull it out, and it's full of phlegm, full of mucus which is coming from the stomach. Then if you do that for 3 weeks, then your kapha, 3 weeks you do it every day, your kapha diminishes considerably, and some diseases which doctors told you, oh, you never can get it out of your system, suddenly it's gone. And then you say, yoga has done a miracle. It's not a proper miracle, because it's not the intervention of God. A miracle means a supernatural intervention. There is nothing supernatural in swallowing a cloth and putting it out. It's natural, but it's very, very extreme and very, very unusual, and normal people would not give it a thought. And if they read it in a book, they would say, come on, man, I will never do that. You'll never catch me doing that one. You know, if you had leprosy in the 15th century, you might consider it. No, it depends of how motivated you are and how bad the problems are. But are there other Dautis out of those 17 Dautis? Are there others which deal with Kapha? Yes, like the one which I mentioned earlier, Vamana Dauti. That also eliminates excessive Kapha. And maybe not as radically and as spectacularly as this. And instead of doing 3 weeks of Vastra Dauti, you have to do 2 months of Vamana Dauti. But the advantage is that Vamana Dauti is way more friendly and it's less scary than this one. And therefore, more people will find the courage to say, you know what, he is right, Vastra Dauti I would never do. But Vamana Dauti, you know, I'm having a real big problem and I'm suffering, and I might consider this one. And therefore, I'm saying this is how it goes. He will describe the 6 kriyas in 2-3 shlokas each. Then he will draw the conclusions and get back to pranayama, because his object was pranayama. And now he remembered and said, actually, I didn't tell you, if you have too much fat or too much kapha, too much pitta, too much vata, your pranayama might not go well. So first you have to kind of heal yourself a little bit with the 6 kriyas. So now he splashes the 6 kriyas, and then he will get back to pranayama. He already described a little bit of this pranayama, left, right, left, but he has more to say about that. So next time I will start from 26. I'll remind you about 24 and 25. I'll go to the shloka number 26 and describe to you quickly in about 10 shlokas the other 5 kriyas which he has to describe, some final conclusions, and then back to pranayama. So that's what we continue next time when we start. I would say it's enough for tonight. When you read especially some of these chapters, which are very technical, they describe techniques. It's a bit frustrating in one way, because you hear the techniques and Swami Vivekananda Saraswati tells you, well, you have to come to the Agama courses to really learn them in detail, because I'm not teaching them here how exactly to do it and all that. We do teach all the pranayamas, all the kriyas, lots of asanas and so on, but that's not happening in a satsang on Thursday evenings. On this satsang, I'm just acquainting you with Hatha Yoga Pradipika, one of the 3 root texts of Hatha Yoga, very few texts, and therefore I'm showing you the spirit, how these people were, how they were thinking, how they were living. And of course you are going to say, you know what, you discouraged me. I cannot go in an ashram in the Himalayas and live like Svatmarama. Correct. But my question is, what can you do? How much can you do? How much are you willing to do? Is yoga important for you? Some of the things which happen through yoga, are they talking to you? Do you feel motivated? Then you want to do something, because you don't want to hear me talking about fairy tales, which happen to others, but they cannot happen to you. You want to hear about things which you can do, which you can accomplish. And therefore, the question is that when you hear this, and when you ask me in questions and answers, and whatever we do, and when you join the courses, we find out exactly how much you can do, because there is something which you can do. And therefore, do what you can do, get the right instruction, and the miracle will happen to you. If it doesn't happen in 3 months, it will happen in 3 years. But it's much better than if it never happens. Therefore, do it to your level. These people are like archetypal. These people are the great ones, and they are models. No, I cannot say that I live the simple life which Svatmarama lived in the Himalayas. No, but it doesn't mean that I haven't learned yoga and I haven't practiced it and I haven't got some of the results of yoga, and therefore I'm capable today to transmit it to other people, to teach about it. Therefore, you also can learn yoga, do yoga, obtain results from yoga, and even become teachers of yoga and transmit it to the next generations, because yoga is outstanding. Yoga is really something unusual and exceptional, and it's a pity that most people think that it's just gymnastics for girls, for chicks, so that they look good and they relax. No, that's not what yoga is. Yoga is somewhere in this dimension. That's why I want to read to you, to share with you such yoga texts. Enough for tonight. Thank you all for joining, and I hope to see you along the other activities in Agama as we continue our season.